These are the answers to the Algebra Regents exam, June 2015, short response questions. In question number 25, all that you need to do is type this into your y equals, hit second and table to find your points. Make sure that when you graph your points that you have arrows on both sides of your ends, all right? You don't have to go crazy and do all of these points like I did. If you did yours a little bit shorter, like maybe you only did from 0 to maybe 5, that would be fine, all right? But you should do many of them to make your graph sort of as big as possible. But make sure that you have the arrows on the ends. Explain how the graph has changed from a related graph where it's just the absolute value of x. So how does it go from the absolute value of x to the absolute value of x minus 3? Well, subtracting 3 from just the x makes it a translation of 3 to the right. If we actually went through and graphed this one, all right, it would look like this. I'm just going to sketch it real quick like that. So we really moved 3 to the right. Now be careful. You might say 3 to the left if you were going from this one that you drew to the original, but you're really going from the original one to the new one. So you're really going 3 to the right. 1 point for the correct graph, 1 point for saying a translation 3 to the right. In question number 26, Alex is selling tickets to the school play. An adult ticket costs $6.50. A student ticket costs $4. Adult tickets are X and there's 12 student tickets. Write a function, f of X, to represent the money that he collected. Because it says to write a function and it says specifically f of X, you have to have that f of X equals at the beginning. If you didn't write f of X equals, you can't get full credit because you didn't write a function. You just wrote an expression if you didn't have the f of X equals. So it's $6.50 per ticket. So $6.50 times the number of tickets, X, plus it's $12 for a student ticket times the cost of a student ticket, which is $4. So you could either write this as an equation, leaving it 12 times 4, or if you multiplied those together already to be 48, that's perfectly fine. Either way is good. 1 point for having the 650x, 1 point for having the plus 48 or plus 12 times 4. You have to have the f of x equals though as well. If you didn't have the f of x equals, you would lose a point. In question number 27, John and Sarah are saving money for a car. The total amount of money John will save is given by the function f of x equals 60 plus 5x. Sarah's equation is x squared plus 46. After how many weeks x will they have the same amount of money? Having the same amount, that's when you want to know that where they are equal to each other. And it does say explain how you arrived at your answer. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to set the one equation equal to the other equation. I want to get everything set equal to 0 because I can see that I have a quadratic in here. So I want to get everything set equal to 0. So I'm going to do minus 60 and minus 5x to get everything on that right-hand side. Now be careful. You can't subtract an x squared minus anything else. There's no other just plain x, but we can do 46 minus 60, which is minus 14. So now I have this equation, 0 equals x squared minus 5x minus 14. You could factor the trinomial by doing reverse FOIL. What times what is negative 14 that adds up to negative 5? It's negative 7 and positive 2. Draw your line down the middle, set both sides equal to 0 and solve. Or you could use the quadratic formula. Either way, you get a 7 and a negative 2. You're going to reject the negative 2. Now, why are we rejecting the negative 2? Because we're talking about x being the number of weeks. The number of weeks, that is time. Time can't be negative, so we're rejecting the negative time. Explain how you arrived at your answer. I set the two functions equal to each other, and I solved for x. I rejected the negative answer because of time. You could say that you factored the trinomial or that you used the quadratic formula. In question number 28, if the difference means to subtract of those two things, is multiplied by 1/2 x squared, what is the result written in standard form? Remember, standard form means that your biggest exponent comes first. So I just have to subtract these two trinomials. Well, when you subtract, you change the minus sign to a plus sign and change all the signs in that second trinomial or binomial, whatever you happen to be subtracting. So we want to change our x squared to a negative x squared, our plus 3x to a minus 3x, and our minus 2 to a plus 2. And now we want to add going down. 3x squared plus negative 1x squared is 2x squared. Negative 2x plus negative 3x is negative 5x. 5 plus 2 is 7. Now, that's what we get when we subtract the two things. But then it says here in the purple, then it's multiplied by 1/2 x squared. So we have to take this answer and multiply it all by 1/2 x squared. So distribute, distribute, distribute. When you multiply with exponents, remember that you have to add your exponent. So it becomes x to the fourth or 1x to the fourth minus 2.5x to the third plus 3.5x to the second. If you just did this first step where you subtracted the two things together correctly, you would get +1. By the way, go back to the last question for a second. What gets 1 and what gets a 2? As long as you came up with the 7, you get 1 point. If you said both 7 and negative 2, you would still get 1 point, but you can't get full credit. The explanation is the other point. In question number 29, Dylan invested $600 into a savings account at 1.6% interest rate. He made no deposits or withdrawals for 2 years, so he left his money in there for 2 years. Find to the nearest penny, the nearest cent, the balance in the account after 2 years. Well, balance equals the principal, the original amount of money, times, in parentheses, 1 plus the rate, all to the time as an exponent. So 600 is our principal. That's what he initially put in there. And then it's growing. When you put money into a savings account, it gets higher and higher. So we're adding, not subtracting. If it was subtracting, the money in the account would be getting lower and lower. So we're adding by 1.6%. We have to move the decimal point over 2 places. So it becomes 0.016 that we're adding to the 1, and then to the second power because we're leaving it in there for 2 years. You could type this part right into the calculator and round it to the nearest penny. It would be $619.35. If you set it up properly, you at least get 1 point, and then I would say the answer would be the other point. If you set it up wrong, maybe you had a minus sign, but then you solved it correctly, there's that double jeopardy concept, and you still get 1 out of 2. In question number 30, determine the smallest integer that makes this statement true. Well, when I go to solve this inequality, I have like terms. I have a negative 3x and I have a negative 5x on the same side of the equal sign. So I'm going to add together my like terms first to be a negative 8x. Now you just have a 2-step equation, minus 7, divide by negative 8s. Be careful. Remember that anytime that this bottom number is negative, you have to flip the sign. So we're dividing by a negative number. So the less than symbol becomes a greater than symbol, and its x is greater than negative 1. Now, you would think that that might be your final answer, but it's not. Just doing that is worth 1 point. Determining the smallest integer, that makes this statement true. Well, if we want all the numbers that are greater than negative 1, the smallest integer that would make it true is 0. So you get 1 point for the inequality. You get 1 point for saying that it's 0. In question number 31, the residual plots. We don't see these questions too often, but residual plots are listed below. Explain using evidence from graph A and B which graph indicates that model, if the model is for the data is a good fit. Well, a good fit. So we want to see linear here. All right, we want to see linear here. So when we would go to graph it, it would look like this. You have about half the points above and about half the points below. It is a clear pattern, where this one doesn't have a clear pattern because the dots are above and below. A linear line would go like this, and it would be like a U-shaped. That's really our graph. So graph A is a better model because it doesn't have a clear pattern. The dots are randomly all over. That means about half the points are above and about half the points are below. So graph A, and the reason saying that it would be more linear. Number 32, a landscaper is creating a rectangular flower bed such that the width is half of the length. So if the length is X, that means the width has to be 1/2 X. The area is 34 square feet. Write and solve an equation to determine the width of the flower bed. All right, so we have to make sure that we sub it back in and get the width to the nearest tenth. The way that you find an area of a rectangle is to multiply the two sides together. So I can multiply my x times the 1/2 x, and it says that it has an area of 34. Well, that would be 1/2 x squared. If I want to solve this equation, I would multiply by 2 and multiply by 2. You could divide by 1/2 and divide by 1/2. That would be fine as well, or 0.5. And then the opposite of squaring a number is to take the square root. So I take the square root of both sides. When you take the square root, remember it's plus or minus. So the square root of 68 is 8.2 plus or minus. You're going to reject the negative length. You can't have a negative measurement of the length of a side. So our answer is 8.2 for the length. 8.2 is not our final answer, though, because they want you to find the width. So you sub in the 8.2, 1/2 times 8.2 is 4.1. If you just found the 8.2, you would get 1 out of 2. If we did these correct first steps where we're multiplying the two sides together, you'd probably get 1 point as well. In question number 33, this is our first 4-point question. Albert says that two systems of equations shown below have the same solutions. Determine and state whether you agree with Albert. Justify your answer. Justify your answer can just be showing work here. So here in this first system, we have to figure out what x equals and what y equals. So when we go and do this, all right, in this first system, I have x's and I have y's. I'm not seeing a nice clear path. We don't have opposites, so we need to multiply to create our own opposites. I'm choosing to make opposites with my y's here. So I'm going to make a 45y and a negative 45y by multiplying by 5 and negative 9. Distribute, 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 distribute. So now I have my opposites. I can now add going down, and these 45s will cancel out. So solve that rest of the equation. For x, you get x equals negative 0.75. Take that answer, I could sub it into here for x or here for x. I chose that first equation just because it had a little bit different numbers. So I subbed it into there. You could have subbed it into the second one, though, and you get y equals 6. For the second equation, I can see that I have an equation right here that I could just divide by negative 8.5 and divide by negative 8.5, and I get an answer of y equals 6. Take that y equals 6, sub it into here or here for your two y's, and you get negative 0.75. So I got the same answers for my x's. I got the same answers for my y's. So is he correct that they have the same solutions? Yes, he is. This one's sort of hard to score here. I would say that finding this set of solutions and this set of solutions are worth 3 points. And then saying that you agree because they both have the same solutions, that would be the 4th point. In question number 34, the equation to determine the weekly earnings of an employee at the Hamburger Shack is given below. So if he works between 0 and 40 hours, he earns 10x. And anything over 40, it's this equation. Determine the difference in salary in dollars. So you want to round to the nearest penny. For an employee who works 52 hours versus one who works 38 hours. So 52 hours, I would have to use the second equation. And I'm going to sub in a 52 in for my x. So when we do that, we get $580. The person only works 38 hours. I have to use this first equation because it's in between 0 and 40. So 10 times 38 is 380. What is the difference in them? All right, notice that it did ask for the difference. The difference would be $200 when I subtract those two answers. In the last part, determine the number of hours an employee must work in order to earn $455. So $445, I'm going to use that second equation. I knew it would be more than 40 because 10 times 40 is 400. If you only work the biggest number here, 40, and I sub that into there, that's going to be 400. So that's how I know that I'm using that second equation. And you do have to explain that. So using that second equation, I'm going to set it equal to 445. So I solve this equation, distribute, distribute, combine my like terms, solve a two-step equation here by adding by 200, dividing by 15, you get 43 hours. So what gets credit here? You would get 1 point for these two answers, 1 point for finding 200, 1 point for finding 43, and 1 point for your explanation. In question number 35, an online electronics store must sell at least $2,500 worth of printers and computers. At least means greater than or equal to. You have to be at least 16 years old to drive a car. So you could be equal to 16 or more than 16. So greater than or equal to. Each printer costs 50, the computer costs 500. The store can ship a maximum, so that's the highest number that could it be, of 15 items per day. So it could be less than 15 if they don't sell a lot, or it could be exactly equal to 15. So setting up our equations. When we go to set up our equations, when we have this equation, and I'm actually going to do this second equation first, the number of printers plus the number of computers is less than or equal to 15. I want to rearrange to get y equals all by itself. Now, how do I know which is x and which is y? They labeled the side going up here. The number of computers is your y value that's on the y-axis. The number of printers is x on the x-axis. So I want to rearrange for c equals, which is really y equals. So I'll do minus p and minus p. So I get negative p plus 15. So I type that into my y equals. I do second in table to find all these points. It is less than or equal to, so it's going to be a solid line and you're shading below. For the other equation, for the amount of money, it's $50 for a printer plus 500 for a computer, and that's going to be greater than or equal to 2,500. Again, I'm going to try and get the c, which is really your y, all by itself so that I could graph it. So to do that, I'm going to do minus 50p and minus 50p and then divide by 500, 500, 500. I get this equation. Remember, c is really your y equals, and this is really your x. So type that into your y equals, hit second in table, and you get these 2 points. That's going to be a solid line because of the or equal to, and it's greater than, so we're shading up above. That creates this double shaded area in here, which is all the possible combinations. So it says determine a possible combination of printers and computers that would allow them to meet all their restraints. Explain how you obtained your answer. Well, you're going to pick a point in the double shaded area. I picked 2 printers and 8 computers. You can pick any point in this double shaded area. It is the coordinate 2, 8, which is in the double shaded area. So how do you grade this? I would get 1 point for graphing this one correctly, 1 point for graphing this one correctly, 1 point for your combination, and 1 point for your explanation. In question number 36, an application developer released a new app to be downloaded. The table is represented the number of downloads for the first 4 weeks. So in week number 1, 120 people downloaded it. Week number 2, 180. Week number 3, 270. Week number 4, 405. Write an exponential equation that models this data. So type the numbers into your L1 and into your L2. Stat calc exponential regression, which is 0. So you get y equals, or you could say f of x equals 80 times 1.5 to the x power. 80 was your a value on your calculator, and 1.5 was your b value. Use this model to predict how many downloads the developer would get in the 26th week. So I sub in a 26 in for my x into my equation. I get 3,030,140. Would it be reasonable to use this model to predict the number of downloads past 1 year? Now, these were the number of weeks. So if I did 52, you're going to get a number that is way too big, a number that doesn't make any sense. Is there any app that when you do 52 weeks, it's going to be 114 billion with a B? That really is too big. It really wouldn't make sense. So no is the correct answer there, because the number would be too big. Once everybody downloads the app, they're not downloading it again. All right. So 114 is too big of a number. All right. That's like more than the number of people on all planet Earth. All right. So that doesn't make any sense. Points wise, 1 point for the equation, 1 point for the 3 million, 1 point for the no, and 1 point for your explanation. And now we get to the last question, the 6-point question. A football player kicks a ball. All right, it's modeled by this equation. where X is the horizontal distance from the kick. So how many feet it was kicked in. The Y value is the H of X. That is the height of the football above the ground measured in feet. So it's feet in the air. We want to graph the interval over from 0 to 150. So I would count by tens here. All right. Type this into your Y equals. Remember alpha and Y equals to do a fraction, or you could just do top divided by bottom to do a fraction. So then type that into your Y equals, hit second and table to get your points. There's our points. Determine the vertex. The vertex is your max or your min. The max or min in this one, remember you can do second and calc and do it. That is 75, 25. That's your max. And interpret the meaning of that. The football is at its highest point at 25 feet after traveling 75 feet. So you had to say that 25 was the highest point after traveling 75 feet. The goalpost is 10 feet high and 45 yards away from the kick. This is a trick part question. We're talking about feet in these. All right, this is feet and this is feet. There are 3 yards in a foot. So the first thing that you need to do is multiply by 3. So we're really talking about 135 feet. Well, if you take a look at your table at 135 feet, they want to know, will it be high enough to pass over the goalpost, which is 10 feet tall? So at 135 feet, when you look at your second and table, it will be at 9 feet. 135 is right here. When I go up, I'm at 9. I'm less than 10. So can it go through the goalpost? No, it can't. So where do your 6 points come from? I'd say 1 point for your, I'd probably say 2 points for your graph. 1 point for your max here of 75, 25, 1 point for your explanation, 1 point for the no, and 1 point for the explanation here. So that's where you get our 6 points from. Take a look at the score and see how you did.